Ready to go? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد اللهم ربنا لك الحمد والشكر كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك اللهم إنا نعوذ بك منك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم اجعله خالصا لوجهك الكريم لا ابتغاء سمعة ولا شهرة ولا رياء. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, welcome again. Jazakumullah khair for being here again tonight. So last week we were talking about the various hardships and tribulations and difficulties that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam experienced because he was now inviting people openly to Islam. And the persecution against Rasulullah went from being essentially started by spreading rumors against him, alayhi salatu wassalam, by spreading rumors against him that he was madman, that he was insane, that he was a poet, that he was a magician. So character assassination. And when that did not work, then they escalated the attacks against him, alayhi salatu wasalam. It became verbal, or became physical rather. We saw last week how when he was in sujood, alayhi salatu wasalam, they brought the intestines and the offals of the camel and they placed it on his neck, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he continued to stay in sujood until his daughter Fatima radiyallahu anha came and cleaned it off his Mubarak neck, blessed neck, alayhi salatu wasalam, and so on. And these difficulties against Rasulullah sallam did not ease. In fact, they continued to escalate. In one incident, for example, a whole group of men of Quraysh were there with Rasulullah sallam, and they said to him, "Are you the man? You are the one who is inviting to one Allah, and you are the one who is speaking bad about our gods, about Allat and Al-Uzza. You are the one who is, tusaffih ahlamana. You are belittling our own traditions, you are belittling, mocking our faith." قال نعم أنا هو. He said, "Yes, I am." And so one of these mal'oons, one of these accursed people grabbed Rasulullah from here and pulled him so hard. And they wanted to beat him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And at that moment, Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu intervened. And he says, he said to them, أتقتلون رجل يقول ربي الله. You want to kill somebody who says Allah is my Rabb. And Abu Bakr was weeping and was crying. How could you do this to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? And many incidents like this, of course, of the worst people, sadly, of the worst people who gave Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam the hardest time and tried to hurt him the most was none other than his own uncle Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab, he was the uncle of Rasulullah, the paternal uncle, not the maternal uncle, no, the paternal, the And he was of, they say, min ashad الناس عداوة لرسول. He had the worst enmity towards Rasulullah, Abu Lahab. Which makes it hard, because when it's somebody close to you, it makes it even harder. If it was a gharib, as they say, it was a stranger who's saying these things against you, then it might be easier. But when it's your own kith and kin, your own relatives who don't believe in what you're saying, then it makes it harder. But this just demonstrates even more the sabr of Rasulullah, the hilm, the forbearance of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Abu Lahab and his wife, also, they both, her name was Jamil, she hated Rasulullah with a passion. Na'udhu billah. And they were looking for any opportunity to harm him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In fact, it said at times that Rasulullah would be going around and Abu Lahab would be chasing him and throwing rocks at Rasulullah, and he would say loudly, he said, he is my nephew, I know him better than you, he's a liar. Can you just imagine for a moment how much that would have hurt Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I mean, it's just unbearable. And never once, and this is the beauty, and this is what we derive from the Seera of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, never once did he turn around and abuse Abu Lahab. Not once. Never once in all of these incidents did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam use vulgar language or foul language to swear at people. Never, never. I mean, you would think they pushed him so much. They pushed him so much. If it was anybody else who wasn't an Nabi, they would have to crack. They'd have to break. Regardless who the person might be, you break. And the worst thing is when you undergo these type of vicious attacks again and again in modern society, in today's world, especially when the media attacks somebody, people end up committing suicide because they can't take it, especially when the attack is vicious against the person himself or herself. There are people who literally go and take their lives away, or they break completely, or their families break. Right? It's the burden is so heavy. And not once did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turn around and abuse the abuser. Not once. Right? And this is what we learn from his Seera alayhi salatu wasalam. It's the hardest thing to do. It's easy to lower the standards. It's very easy. It's easy when somebody swears at you, you swear back. That's the easiest option. That's the easiest option. The hardest option is to restrain and refrain. That's the hardest option. That's a hard option. And that's why Rasulullah said in a hadith that is sahih, ليس الشديد بالسرعة إنما الشديد الذي يملك نفسه عند الغضب. هذه الشدة الحقيقية يعني. He said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a strong person is not one who wrestles and defeats people. You know, big, muscular, mashallah, can beat everybody. That is one form of strength. It's a physical form of strength, but it is not the real strength. It is one form of strength. And Rasulullah said, لَيْسَ الشَّدِيدُ بِالسُّرْعَةِ. A strong person is not one who wrestles and knocks people down. But a real strong person is the one who controls himself in times of anger, which is very difficult. And this applies to both man and woman. And the most important field, the most important place to practice this is inside the house. Absolutely. Which can be very difficult, even more difficult, especially they say when you know the faults of your wife and she knows all your faults. Right? And it is that at that moment, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "La yafriq mu'min mu'mina." A believing man never lets go with a believing woman of his wife, never divorces her or leaves her or abandons her or abuses her because of a fault that he sees in her. And the opposite is true. For if he sees a fault, quickly he looks at that which is good. I mean, this deen is a deen that is raqi. It is, you know, the word civilized. They use this word civilized to distinguish one from one who is so-called uncivilized. You want sophistication, you want a true example of excellence, a true example of character and manners. Look at the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Magnificent, absolutely beautiful. He was a reflection of the beauty of Allah Ta'ala on this earth. You cannot put it in any other way. Who in the world can be walking down the street and somebody comes and slaps him on the back or grabs him, pulls him so hard that it marks his neck and he turns around with a smile? Who does that? But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Abu Lahab and his wife Jamil, they were of the worst enemies towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Jamil, particularly the wife of Abu Lahab, she used to be known as a woman who spreads namima. She used to go and spread false tales. False tales is one of the worst sins. Because what false tales, namima, does is it creates discord, it creates enmity and difficulties between people. Example, somebody comes and lies and he says, oh, do you know what Ahmed said? And he goes to somebody and says, oh, do you know what Abdullah said? Do you know what Muhammad said? And continues to do that and to spread this hatred amongst people and enmity. And this is what Jamil, that was her job. And because she hated Rasulullah so much, she would know which pathways he would take, and she would go and throw shawk, thorns, a heap of thorns, to throw it in the path of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And not only this, she would go and take the rubbish and throw it at the door of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And one day, what she wanted, she got so fed up that she grabbed a big rock in her hand and went looking for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the intention of hitting him with this rock. Can you imagine? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And at that moment, he was with Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. And they could see from far this woman, raging woman, fire in her face, coming around and saying, where is this man Muhammad? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr says, Ya Rasulullah, you need to hide. Because he says, don't worry, she will not see me. Allah Ta'ala will conceal me from her eyes. And so she came screaming and shouting. And Abu Bakr said, Wallahi, she came and stood right in front of Rasulullah sallallahu, and she did not see him. Alayhi salatu wassalam. And she was screaming in the face of Abu Bakr. Where is this? Where is Muhammad? Have you seen him? Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concealed him from her eyes, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Such was the enmity and the hatred of Abu Lahab and Jamil, his wife, towards Rasulullah sallam, that Allah Ta'ala had to reveal an entire surah about them. Tabbat yada Abi Lahab wa tab. And as we said earlier, the ulama say this verse, this surah alone is a testimony that this Quran is from Allah Ta'ala. And this Rasulullah is haqq. Rasulullah is true. Why? Because in this ayah, Allah Ta'ala is saying, when Abu Lahab and his wife were alive, that they will go to Jahannam and they will be the fuel of Jahannam. Now Abu Lahab could have, to try to prove Rasulullah false, he could have said, well, I'm a Muslim now, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Rasulullah, after the revelation of this surah. He could have, but Allah Ta'ala would not allow it. Because Allah Ta'ala determined his fate. And Allah Ta'ala determined his fate and that of his wife only after the vicious attacks on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He, as we said, the extent of the hatred of Abu Lahab towards Rasulullah was that he would chase him everywhere. I mean, you imagine how annoying that would be for you. How annoying if somebody was to chase you. Okay, maybe if somebody sees you by yourself and says, I hate your guts, I hate you, I don't like you, you are this and you are that, you might tolerate it, right? But now imagine with me, if everywhere you went, this person chased you and abused you wherever you went, in the markets, in the gatherings of people. When you went to visit the pilgrims who were coming, he would go and abuse you in front of them. Can you imagine? What would you do? I mean, you and I, we would lose it, man. Absolutely. Smaller things, much less, and people lose it nowadays. People lose it. That is why they say, ulama say, deen is meant to refine us. Deen is not just about external observances for the sake of external observances. Deen is not just about salah for the sake of salah, and fasting for the sake of fasting. What next? What has it done for you? How has it fixed you? How has it refined you, refined this character? How has it refined this character? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these were just samples. These are just small samples of the abuse that was ushered against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Other incidents, they threw rocks at him. Sometimes they came and spat at him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They, as we said, they throw rubbish inside his house. Aside from the fact that they used to put rubbish outside, they would take the rubbish and throw it in his courtyard, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he would just clean it and keep going. These are not fairy tales. This is real. This is real. And just imagine with me for a second, if we as Muslims were to become like that. That is not to say you don't stand up for justice, and you don't stand up against aggression, and you don't stand against oppression. Of course, we are not pacifists to the extent where rights will be, or countries can be attacked and invaded, and we say and do nothing. No. But at the very least, at the individual level, with my wife, with my son, with my daughter, with my neighbor, with my colleague, what sort of qualities do I have? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam continued to be persecuted, alayhi salatu wasalam, so much so that sometimes he would come home and his daughter Fatima would meet him, and she would look at him and just cry. She would look at him and she says, "You are the Rasul of Allah, you are the Messenger of Allah, and this is what is done to you." And she would just cry. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved Fatima so much. It is said that, of course, as you know, he buried all of his children and daughter when he was alive, except Fatima. That's also another hardship that he had to endure, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's very difficult for a parent to bury their own child. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam buried all of his children, boys and girls, when he was still alive, except Fatima. But he told her when he was on his deathbed that you will follow me. 6 months after he died, she followed him. When he was dying and Aisha was sitting there and Fatima walked in, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Fatima went close to him and he whispered in her ear, and so she cried. Fatima cried, and Aisha doesn't know what is being said. And then he whispered a second time in the ear of Fatima, and she smiled. And Aisha was wondering what's going on. And it wasn't until later, until Rasulullah was buried, he died, and he was buried, that Aisha went and asked Fatima, "What did he tell you that made you smile first and then you cried?" You cried first and then you smiled. He said, "First he told me that that's it, he's leaving. So I cried. And then he said to me, 'My dear Fatima, you will be the first of my people to follow me.'" And she was very happy at that news, right? So this was another form of hardship. And as you know, in Arab cultures and non-Arab cultures, Southeast Asian cultures, they love to have a boy child. Boys are something, right? The heir to the throne, which is problematic, because Islam came and changed that mentality. And he says whether it's a boy or it's a girl, it's a ni'mah from Allah. In fact, even to elevate girls and women much higher, the Prophet ﷺ, to teach the Arabs 1400 years ago, he said, if Allah Ta'ala gives you a daughter and you look after her, then you and I will be like this in paradise. And he put his 2 index fingers next to each other. They said, what about 2 daughters, 3 daughters? He said, 2 daughters, 3 daughters. Daughters are seen as a rahmah. They are mercy from Allah Ta'ala. So he elevated their status immediately. And he says, whether it's a boy or a girl, in the eyes of Allah Ta'ala, they are the same. And you as parents should not show any distinction between boy or girl. In fact, many ulama say women are quicker to attain spirituality than men. If they try, if they work, if they attempt to become more spiritual, it's quicker for them to become more spiritual. because they're kinder, they're gentler often, they're more merciful, they have more compassion. Allah created them like that because they are mothers. They ought to be mothers. Right? And so Rasulullah ﷺ in the Arab, during that Arab culture, having a boy was a big thing. And the fact that Rasulullah ﷺ, all of his born boys, they all died when they were young, all his boys. And they teased him. That was another hardship. They came and teased him. They said, you are abtar. Abtar meaning you are disconnected, you are maqtu'. Na'udhu billah. He says, they teased the Rasulullah ﷺ. Look, you have no boys. They all died. And they teased him. They said, you are abtar, disconnected from male progeny. And then Allah Ta'ala, to console him, to ease his pain, He reveals another surah in the Quran. إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ. Don't worry about what they say, because إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ, we have given you Kawthar. We have given you Kawthar. Kawthar is the special fountain that Rasulullah will be given on the Day of Judgment. And we should always make dua, Ya Allah, make us drink from His hands from the Kawthar. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. So don't be too worried about what they say. Continue to pray and sacrifice for the sake of Allah. And then Allah says to him, it is your enemies who are disconnected, not you. Yes, you may not have male progeny, but that does not make you disconnected. You are connected with the one who deserves to be connected with, Allah Ta'ala. But they are disconnected. They may have male progeny, boys, but they are disconnected from Allah Ta'ala. When the mushrikeen saw that Rasulullah would not budge, regardless of what they have done to him, now they turned their attention to persecute those who were closest to him. Again, it's a foul strategy. It's a very deceitful, evil strategy. And you see it today in modern world, sadly. If they can't get you, they'll try to get somebody close to you. Right? You saw it recently in its ugliest forms in Palestine, when the Israeli soldiers who could not get what they want, they went and shot a renowned journalist in the face. They said, well, if we can't get what we want, we'll get something else. You must have heard about her. Though not a Muslim, she was a Christian, Shireen, but she was a veteran of a journalist, covered the Palestine issue, and then she was outside of the Jenin camp in Palestine trying to cover the atrocities that the Israelis would do. And one of the soldiers shot, although she was dressed in journalist gear and had press uniform on her, and of course, you know, they have bullet-proof vests, so they targeted the face. No different to what they have done to Rasulullah. They said, if we can't get you, we'll go and get those who are closest to you. And so the first of those was, of course, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And Abu Bakr's nature was quite gentle. Gentle, but as you know, Abu Bakr was very well regarded in Quraysh, and a very knowledgeable man of Quraysh, especially his knowledge of history of the Arabs and his knowledge of al-ansab, or lineage, was very profound. And he was recognized as a respectable, reputable man of Quraysh, a strong merchant, but very gentle, unlike Umar, who was very tough. And so Abu Bakr's nature was always gentle. They said even when he was Khalifa, he eventually had like a bent back because he didn't eat much. And he was in excessive worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. And the taqwa that he had was so much that he could not lead people in salah because he would start weeping so much that nobody understands what he was saying. That's the gentleness of Abu Bakr. And as you know, when Rasulullah was dying, he asked that Abu Bakr lead the salah. And so Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, and the daughter of Abu Bakr, she said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, ask somebody else to lead the salah, because Abu Bakr is such a gentleman, he's so soft that if he starts leading salah, he starts crying so much that people don't understand what he's reading." He said, "Oh, ask Abu Bakr to lead the salah. Ask him." So he did lead the salah, and that's what happened. He started leading the prayer. As soon as he was reading the Quran, he started crying. But Abu Bakr, despite his gentleness and softness, in certain mawaqif, in certain instances, he was a lion, he was a giant. In fact, he took in certain situations, he showed more determination and strength than the likes of Umar radiallahu anhu. And this is a very important point, because they say al-rijal bil mawaqif. People are judged based on the positions they take in certain circumstances. And the ulama likewise. You might find many people who are named ulama, they are given the label of a alim or a scholar. But when it comes to speaking out about issues or against aggression, they will not say anything. But there will be single or individual ulama who would rise to the occasion, and they would speak against injustices and tyrannies and the like, regardless. And that's why they say a true alim's essence and a true man's essence appears in certain difficult circumstances. And Abu Bakr showed that multiple times, as we shall see later after the death of Rasulullah, but also in this case, when they were only 38 Sahaba, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, "Ya Rasulullah, let's go and declare it openly. We are 38 now, let's go to the outside of the Kaaba, they used to call it the masjid also. Let's go outside and just openly declare the Shahada and declare Islam." Rasulullah says, "Ya Abu Bakr, inna qaleen." He said, "Oh Abu Bakr, we are still few in numbers." Now it's quite interesting that Rasulullah says that, because all he has to do is raise his hands and make dua. Khalas, Ya Allah, help us. But the ulama say Rasulullah didn't do that in most cases, because he wanted to set a pattern for us, that when we stand up to do da'wah and we come across these circumstances, we would look back and say Rasulullah suffered and we will suffer. He went through hardships, we went through hardships. If every time Rasulullah came across a hardship, he asked Allah for help and the help came straight away, then we would say, what chance do we have? You get it? So there is a lot of wisdom in that. And he's trying to teach the Sahaba that in this dunya there are sunan kawniya. There are universal laws that apply to one and all, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. There are sunan shari'iyya and sunan kawniya, universal laws that apply to all. 1 + 1 = 2. It's a universal law which Allah Ta'ala put. We had to discover it, mathematicians had to discover it, but it's there, Allah put it. Right? A universal law is that, if you are 2 or 3 of you, you don't go and fight 100 people. You'll be beaten. Don't think you can, right? Unless in certain exceptional circumstances, such as in the battlefield with Rasulullah, when they had no other choice. So Rasulullah says to Abu Bakr, "We are small in number, O Abu Bakr." But interestingly, Abu Bakr insisted. Despite his gentleness, he said, "Ya Rasulullah, let's go out." And he was relying to some extent on his position in Quraysh, thinking that they will not do anything. And so they did. They went to around the Kaaba and they spread out. And Abu Bakr was the first to call out, right? And they say, كان أول خطيب دعا إلى الإسلام was Abu Bakr. After Rasulullah, the first person who did essentially an open invitation to Islam was Abu Bakr after Rasulullah. Of the people who were present was a man called Utbah bin Rabi'a. Al-Fasiq Utbah bin Rabi'a. What Utbah bin Rabi'a did next is unfathomable, unimaginable. Utbah bin Rabi'a takes his shoes off, which had a very hard sole, both of them, and he turns them onto their edge like this, so that the hardest part is the edge of the sole of the shoe. And he goes to Abu Bakr and starts beating Abu Bakr on his face with the edge of his shoes. And others joined in. Can you imagine? They said Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was beaten so hard that when he collapsed, they could not recognize his nose in his face anymore. Yeah, it was all beaten up, it was swollen, so much swollen that you couldn't see the features of his face. And the only reason they stopped, they were about to kill Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And the only reason they stopped was some of the tribesmen came and they said, if you were to kill Abu Bakr, then the tribe of Abu Bakr will fight you and they would want their qisas, they would want retribution. So they stopped. They carried Abu Bakr home on a piece of cloth. They laid a piece of cloth, they laid like a stretcher, but in this case it's a cloth, and carried him to his house, radiyallahu anhu, completely out of it. He had fainted, he was bruised, and the rest of the Sahaba, Rasulullah and the Sahaba then went away and they stayed at the house of Arqam bin Arqam. And Rasulullah was very concerned for Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. Abu Bakr's father, who was a blind old man, who wasn't a Muslim yet, came to visit his son, and Jamil also, the mother of Abu Bakr, her name was also Jamil, she came to check on Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and few other men of his tribe. They came, stood next to his head, and they were calling him to wake him up, Eventually he woke up. By the end of the day, they said Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu woke up. Al-Khayr, I beg your pardon. Her name is Al-Khayr. As soon as he opened his eyes, he said, how is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? That's the love, how much love he had radiallahu anhu for Rasulullah sallallahu. They said, you are asking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you are in this situation. Look at you. He said, how is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They said, we don't know, because none of those who were present are Muslim. So they brought him some food and water to eat. He says, wallahi, I will not touch food or water until my eyes lay on Muhammad and make sure that he's okay. Allahu Akbar. I mean, usually when a person is in that state of absolute desperation, who has just been beaten up so badly that you can't recognize his face anymore, and he wakes up, he either says, heck with this is too much, man, why am I bothering? Give up. Or at the very least, to think of himself first. We would probably say, where's the Panadol? Bring me the Panadol, bring me the Panamax. Oh, I've got so much a headache, please give me something to calm the pain. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and you see this pattern of behavior from Abu Bakr throughout his life. And that is why he was the most beloved to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he says, I will not touch food or water until I see Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Al-Khayr says, how would I know where he is? He says, go to Fatima bint al-Khattab and ask her. Fatima al-Khattab is who? Sister of Umar, who had just become Muslim before Umar, but she kept her Islam secret. So Al-Khayr goes to Fatima bint al-Khattab, and she says to her, my son Abu Bakr is asking about Muhammad. Fatima says, لا أدري من أبو بكر ولا أدري من Muhammad. She said, I don't know who Abu Bakr is and I don't know who Muhammad is. Because she wasn't sure who this woman, why is she asking about Muhammad? She doesn't want to look at the hirs, also the concern and the astuteness of Fatima, this lady, who also was concerned for the safety of Rasulullah ﷺ, that she would not disclose his location until she knew exactly who is asking about him. So Fatima bint Khattab, she says, I don't know who Muhammad is and I don't know Abu Bakr, but if you take me to your son, I might see if I can help. Because she wants to make sure that it is Abu Bakr. So she took her home to Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr looked at her, he said, how's Muhammad? She still wouldn't answer. She looked around because his mother was still in the room and she doesn't want to disclose the location of Rasulullah ﷺ. So Abu Bakr says, it's all right, she's my mother. So she said, he's okay, O Abu Bakr. Rasulullah is fine and he's at the house of Arqam bin Arqam. He said, I must go and see him now. I must go and see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam now. So they said we had to literally carry him and take him to the house of Arqam bin Arqam, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was staying. As soon as he walked in, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came and started kissing Abu Bakr, and he was crying alayhi salatu wasalam, because of what had happened to Abu Bakr. And the other Sahaba came also, and they were kissing Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. فقال أبو بكر, at that moment Abu Bakr says, بأبي وأمي يا رسول الله ليس لي بأس إلا ما نال الفاسق من وجهي وهذه أمي. Look at I just can't imagine, I can't believe the mindset these people had. After all of this, Abu Bakr says, look, oh Rasulullah, don't worry about me, it's all fine. There's nothing wrong with me except what this man did to my face. Full stop. And then he says, oh Prophet of Allah, this is my mother. And I care for her so much. فَادْعُهَا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Please invite her to Allah. Who thinks like this? Who thinks like this in this situation? Abu Bakr says, فَادْعُهَا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Please invite her to Allah. وَادْعُ اللَّهَ لَهَا. And please make dua for her hidayah. عَسَى اللَّهَ أَن يَسْتَنْقِذَهَا بِكَ مِنَ النَّارِ. Maybe, look Abu Bakr what he said. He says, maybe Allah Ta'ala will save my mother from the fire because of your dua. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The fikr, what it tells, the fikr for da'wah and hidayah was paramount in their minds. The mindset, the concern for people's hidayah was the highest priority in their minds. This is the only conclusion I could derive from this. Because if you can imagine for a second the physical state of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Can you imagine him with us now? Bruised, face so bruised you can't recognize him. The fact that he actually got out of bed to go and see Rasulullah itself is something. And now he's standing there and clearly he is hurt, clearly he is in pain. He doesn't say, oh Prophet Allah, make dua against them. He doesn't say those, this and that, goes in outrage and starts using colorful language to describe those people who did that. He doesn't do that. You know why? Because he's the student of Rasulullah. He's never seen Rasulullah does that. So he wouldn't do it. Instead, the concern is what? How can my mother get hidayah? So Rasulullah made dua for her and he invited her to Islam and she accepted Islam. And you can't imagine then the joy, the happiness that came in the heart of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, which made him now completely forget the pain that he was in. And this should be our mentality. This should be our mindset. Our mindset is that everyone out there is a potential Muslim. Everybody is a potential Muslim. You and I are tools. We are keys. We are tools that can be used by Allah Ta'ala to open people's hearts. But that must first start by understanding that foremost our responsibility as Muslims is da'wah ila Allah. There's no doubt about it, because there is no ummah after this ummah and there is no nabi after this nabi. Sahih? So who's going to do the da'wah ila Allah if not the Muslim? Has anyone here been visited by the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons? You know, they come and knocking on your door. You have? Right? I'm finished now. I'll finish inshallah. You know, you have, and I also was visited, right? Quite a number of times. You gave the Quran? So, but just to show you, if people who we say are on batil, they go around and give da'wah because they're convinced about their batil. And the people who have haqq, what are they doing? So when I was visited one day by those, they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they dressed, you know, the Jehovah's Witnesses dress in a certain way, and they're very nice, tidy, they come like a family sometimes. And when I was in Brisbane, and at the time I was wearing one of these thawbs, but it was one of the white thawb, the jubba and my topi. And it was a hot day, so they knocked and I came out. And when I opened the door and they saw me, it's like they saw a ghost, right? Because they didn't expect to see. They wanted somebody they can recruit, right? But they didn't expect somebody who was already recruited. So, wrong exact. But they froze. They stood there, and I said, and I conversed with them. I said, "How are you? How's everything? How is your day?" They said, "Yeah, we are good." And they're standing in the sun. I said, "Why don't you come in the shade? It's just too hot there for you." And they stopped there, they didn't want to say anything. I said, "Look, I know you came to invite me to your faith. So go ahead." And now they don't know what to say. I said, no, tell me what you have. So they did. And then when they finished, I said, "You know what, I really admire what you do." And I meant it. I said, "You know why? Because you remind me of the prophets and the messengers. They used to go and invite people to Allah. And you are convinced about your message, and you go and invite people. So I admire you for that. But just as I have listened to you respectfully, would you mind listening to me respectfully?" Well, now they'll have to say yes. So they said yes. So I gave them my da'wah. Gently, and Allah, hidayah is with Allah Ta'ala. The point is, da'wah ila Allah, and this is the importance, one of the most important things about the Seera of Rasulullah is that foremost he was a da'i ila Allah. And this ummah is an ummah of da'wah. And you see that in the life of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Even at the most difficult moment of his life, when he could have almost lost his life, and he comes and stands before Rasulullah beaten up, face fully scarred. He doesn't care about any of that. First he cared about Rasulullah, and this should be our sentiment towards Rasulullah. As when the cartoons, so-called cartoons about Rasulullah came out, the slogan among the Arabs was "Illa Rasulullah," except the Messenger of Allah. You can go and do what you want, except the Messenger of Allah. This is a red line for us, and it was a red line for Abu Bakr. And that's when he said, when he opened his eyes, he said, "I want to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." And he goes and sees him, and Rasulullah says, "Are you okay?" He says, "Yeah, I'm fine, O Messenger of Allah. It's my face is bruised, but that's no problems." And then immediately he says, "O Messenger of Allah, this is my mother, give her da'wah." I mean, who thinks like that? Really, who thinks like that? The one who thinks like that is the one whose heart is full of rahmah towards people. And he wants nothing but khair for people. That's the one who thinks like that. And this is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And you shall see later how this rahmah in the heart of Abu Bakr manifested, came when he was dealing with the slaves, so-called slaves, how he used to go and purchase their freedom. So Rasulullah makes dua for al-Khayr, the mother of Abu Bakr, and Allah Ta'ala accepted his dua, and she became Muslim, and Abu Bakr left the house of Arqam bin Arqam, the happiest man on the face of this earth, because Allah Ta'ala gave the most beautiful gift to the most beautiful person in his life, and that's his mother. Allah gave her hidayat, guidance, to his mother, radiyallahu anha. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us the means of khair, of goodness. May Allah Ta'ala, whilst living in this country, use us to be callers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to be keys that open the locks on the hearts of people. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our speech and our actions and our interactions and our behavior and our conduct in accordance to the beautiful way of his Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that people can be attracted to it. That's the ultimate aim. We are not in this country to just eat and drink and build and accumulate. These things come and go. We are here for a reason. There's no such thing as accident or incident or haphazard. It's all qadar. And so each one of us must ask Allah to use us to be inviters to Him, and to use us to be a means of hidayat, guidance for people, inshaAllah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullah khair. See you next Jumu'ah, inshaAllah.